This episode of Brains on Games will preview a word game where the rules change every round. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode we're going to talk about an upcoming word game where the rules are constantly changing. It's a game that was sent to me a little while ago, a game called, I had it upside down here, a game called Lock. You can see the keyhole in the front cover. Now, Lock is sort of a party game. You can play it with as few as 2 players, but the play count goes up to 20. People 12 and up can play, but I think 10-year-olds could figure out the words in this game. And it's a game that can be played in anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes. Let's take a closer look at Lock. Lock is a light word guessing game where the words have 4 different levels of difficulty. So you choose your difficulty level at the beginning of the game, but there's not a lot of strategy here. You're just trying to help your team to guess those words. You win the game by having the most victory points after 10 rounds, and each round there's some different rule that dictates how you can give clues to allow your teammates to guess those words or how they can guess the words. Inside the box, the first thing that you're going to notice is that there are a ton of cards. This is a prototype. There are even more cards. I had 2 boxes of playing cards that were full of more word cards, and so they didn't all fit in this box, but this is a prototype, and the manufacturer has promised that everything is going to fit in the box when the final game comes out. The word cards have 4 different levels of difficulty on them. So you've got yellow, which is the easiest one, and then you flip it over, and the green one is the next hardest, and then you can flip it over again, and you get increasingly difficult words. You've also got a scoring board just to keep track of where all the teams are. This is a game, like I said, you want to get the most points after 10 rounds, but you can play it cooperatively and try to earn as many points as possible. Or you can play in teams and compete against one another, which I think is a good mechanism. You can choose to play competitively or cooperatively. You've got cubes for up to 4 teams that can play. We played with only 2 teams when we played the game. One team had 3 people and one had only 2. And of course, you've got a timer because this is a game where you're racing to get as many clues as possible. Those word cards had a whole bunch of words at each difficulty level, and so there are categories that you're going to be trying to guess. You've got a cheat sheet that comes in the box for each player. Each team will have this little cheat sheet that indicates that you might be guessing people and places, or adjectives or nouns, or verbs or phrases. Phrases are worth an extra point because it can be harder to guess a whole phrase rather than just an individual word. And you might notice here at the bottom, it says keyword, and the keyword gives you an extra point. So each round, one of those categories is going to give players a bonus point if their team is able to guess the word. The games are played over 10 rounds, and each round has some different rule that dictates how players can give clues or how players can give their answers. Now, most of these word games are like that. They have some sort of a gimmick. There's some special rule that makes that game unique. Poetry for Neanderthals, I think, is the most recent one that we talked about here on Brains on Games. And in that game, you could only give 1-syllable clues for the words that the players are trying to guess. But Lock really elevates this. And I think, now I might need to play it a couple more times to really be sure, but I think Lock is probably my favorite word game right now because each round, everything changes. And I really, really like that. So you have a deck of these cards that dictates the rules for each round. There's 10 rounds, so there's 10 of these cards, but there is an expansion that has some extra cards, so you can mix and match and replace some of the cards in the deck. There's also a card that says House Rules on it, and the House Rules card allows you to make up rules for a particular round. So you can even add some if you wanted to. And the one that I held up here from the expansion allows you to mimic Poetry for Neanderthals because 1-syllable clues are all that's allowed for that round. In the last round, this is the card that will go on the bottom of the round deck. In the last round, you're going to get a bonus point for each word you're able to guess. That's going to go on the bottom. The first round has no special rules in the base game. That one goes right at the top, but all the other ones, you shuffle them in, so it's going to be randomized. And the round rules are fantastic in this game. There's a few things that I really, really like that really stand out to me. For example, In a competitive game, some of the rounds have this little picture of a couple of hands. Those rounds are all play rounds. What that means is that all the teams can try to guess the word, and if another team guesses before the players do, if I'm the one who's trying to earn the points and another team guesses the word before me, I'm blocked from getting that word. So you can really get everybody involved all at the same time, even in a competitive game of lock. So I really like those all play rounds, but there's all kinds of fun rules here. You've got, for example, one round is going to be 4 word clues only. My son was a big Harry Potter fan in high school. He read all the books. He read them probably 20 times between junior high and the time that he graduated. He watched all of those movies. He loved Harry Potter. And Harry Potter was the place clue for the people and places section of the card. And he was only allowed to give a 4 word clue to make that happen. Plus, you've got this timer going. You've got a time limit. You've got to guess as many words as you can within 45 seconds, I think, is on that sand timer. So you're really working hard and you have to think fast. So with the 4 word clues, you can say the category that you're trying to get the player to guess. So he said people and places, and his clue, his 4 word clue was The Boy Who Lived. Now, that's the title, I think, of the first chapter of the first Harry Potter book. But why do I know that? Only because he talked about Harry Potter all the time when he was younger. But his opponent hadn't read those books, so he had no idea who is the boy who lived? What's that supposed to mean? They had a big, sort of a joking argument about it afterwards, and we all had a good laugh about the whole thing. So you might have to do 4 word clues. Another crazy round was the memory round. This was, did this ever take a lot of attention and effort? In the memory round, the clue giver gives those clues and watches the clock, hopefully watches the sand timer tick down, but no one's allowed to answer until the last clue is given. The players have to remember the clues and remember their guesses and then say them at the end. So the clue giver has to remember, has to leave enough time and make sure they don't overload the other players with clues and try and guess, well, is this going to be enough information for my team to guess these words? So I found myself kind of rehearsing my guesses as I went through that list. Luckily, when we when we played, we were playing in the easy level primarily, so it wasn't too much of an issue. So you put the last round card face down at the bottom, you shuffle up the other cards, and then the first round goes on top. And then all you're doing is you're flipping over each round. And then at the end, you count up how many words you got, and that's going to determine your score. The keyword is determined by the top card that's underneath the one that you've just flipped. So in the first round here, I've got adjectives underneath. So if I'm able to guess the adjective on whatever card I draw from the box, that's going to allow me to get 1 extra point. And then the next round, it's the nouns that are going to work. So there's 10 different sets of rules for 10 different rounds in the game, and you play through them, and we laughed and through the entire thing. There was a little bit of trash talk, and it was fun when we were able to block the other players from guessing their word, but you do have to really think fast and come up with those clues very quickly. What skills are you practicing when you're playing this game of lock? Well, of course, vocabulary is super important, both for figuring out the answers and for giving good clues. And you're doing that verbal reasoning. You're solving problems. You're trying to put clues together that are going to work for your teammates. So you're trying to figure out what the clue giver is trying to tell you. There's also a language fluency component, or lexical fluency, if you want to call it that, because it's not just about having the vocabulary, it's about being able to access that vocabulary as quickly as possible. 45 seconds is not a long time when you're trying to guess as many of these words on those cards as you can. And then you've got that decision-making speed of how are you going to give those clues, how much time you're going to leave on that memory round. There's the verbal memory component in some of those rounds. And in fact, in the expansion, one of the replacement cards is that the clue giver has to memorize the words and give all their clues while they're remembering without being allowed to look at the card again. So it really changes things up and keeps the game very interesting over 10 rounds. You don't quite feel like you've had enough of this game after only 10 rounds of playing. Final thoughts about Lock. Well, obviously, you could probably tell from the video so far that I really enjoyed this game and the family really enjoyed it, and it may be one of my favorite word games of all time. It's a game that has so much replayability because you've got, I think, over 6,000 words in the box, and there's those 4 levels of difficulty. And I like when games clearly identify the level of difficulty you're working with, because that can allow you in a game like this to handicap for different levels of player ability. So if it's adults playing against kids, maybe the adults use the words that are at a more difficult level than the kids do, and that just makes things easier. Maybe the adults don't block in the rounds where the kids are playing, because that might be disappointing for them when the adults can get those answers faster than they can. So you can really customize and handicap things so that everyone can be involved and feel like they're doing well in this game. And it is a game that's really elevated by those constantly changing rules. Some rounds players, I think, are probably going to dread. They don't want to see that memory round come up, maybe. Other rounds are going to be the ones that players really like. I do like the single syllable clues. I like the one where you had to think of 4 word clues and then you couldn't give any more. So it's just, I think it's a head and shoulders above most of these other games because it's so flexible, because it's so unique. It really does make it an ideal word game, and the fact that you can play it with as few as 2 players certainly does make it a lot of fun. This is one, if I were an English teacher, I would pull this out in class. So, of course, I have to thank the folks who sent me this game, and I will include in the comments section information about where you can find it. This is a preview. The game is coming out soon, I think. So any information I can find, I'll include it in the show notes. If you have any questions or comments, in fact, I would love to know, what would your house rule be if you were playing this game at home with your family? But if you have any other questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.